So we're still continuing with our conflict resolution principles for this week. We're on principle number 13, and principle number 13 is you want to point out a mistake that you made before you point out a similar mistake that somebody else is making. By the way, this is a big part of a good chunk of the high impact leaders class that we teach when we do this for big corporations and that kind of thing. The reason why this one is so valuable is because you can use this a lot of different ways, but it kind of goes back to the way that human nature works. Anytime that we go and we tell somebody that they're making a mistake, anytime we tell somebody that they've screwed up, there's an automatic resistance to that. People automatically they'll get their defenses up when you go out and point out a mistake that they've made. So a better way, a softer way to do it is to talk about how you've made a mistake. So now instead of pointing a finger at the other person, you're kind of pointing the finger at yourself and saying, hey, I don't want you to make the same mistake I made. So a lot of us who are parents kind of do this, when we're trying to coach our kids, we'll kind of tell them about how we made a mistake and we don't want them to make the same mistakes that we made. So basically all you have to do is just to give them an example or a story first, and then point out that if they make a behavior change, they'll get a better result. I'll give you a good example of this. Back when I first started doing sales, it was my very first big corporate sales job, and I was very eager to get started. So I ended up showing up about 30 minutes before the office even opened. And I figured I'd been sitting in the parking lot for a while, but when I got there, the light was on in the sales office. So I kind of went and pushed open the door. There was a guy named Norm who was one of the more seasoned kind of sales guys there at the office. And it was funny because when I walked in, he said, "Oh, you must be the new guy." And I said, "Yeah." And I introduced myself. He introduced himself to me. And he said, "Hey, you're going to do well here." And I said, What do you mean?" He said, "Well, just the fact that you're coming in early means that you're probably going to make a whole lot more money than everybody else does." And so about 3 months later or so, Norm actually retired. And when he retired, he came up to me like the last day that he was there. And he said, "Hey," he said, I really like your work ethic. I want to commend you on how well you've done so far, and just keep doing what you're doing because you're going to make a lot of money here." And I didn't really think that much of it because on Monday morning I kind of did the same thing that normally did. I came in at 7:30. Everybody else came in at 8:30. And nothing really happened. Tuesday, same thing. Wednesday, though, I get a phone call. As soon as I was just unlocking the door. In fact, I was turning off the alarm code. I was punching the alarm code, and the phone started ringing. And so I'm just kind of hurriedly, I answer the phone. Turns out it's a guy named Bill Lawley. Bill was the CEO of a big company in Dallas where I was working at the time. And he kind of mentioned, he said, "Hey, I understand you guys do some sales training." And I said, "Yes, sir, I sure do." He said, "Well, can you come out and tell me about it?" And I actually set up an appointment to go talk to Mr. Lawley that morning. So I was at his office by 8 o'clock, and by 8:30 I'd sold him about $30,000 in training. And it was funny because what hit me at that moment was that I remembered the first 3 months that Norm was working, that Norm and I would come in together and he would answer the phone. And it kind of hit me that every time he was answering the phone, he was getting some of these big deals that he was really known for. And the reason why is because the people who were calling in at 6:30, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning were the folks that were the decision makers, the presidents, the CEOs, these high level people that if I tried to call them at 9:30 or 10 in the morning, I'd get their voicemail. So it was a big learning experience. So what was interesting is I got 3 more contracts like that within the first month or so after Norm left. And basically what he told me was absolutely true. Start working, start making your phone calls early, and you're going to make a whole lot more money. So that's what I would suggest you do as well, especially if you're in sales. Start making your sales phone calls before the 8 o'clock starting hour. And if you do that, you're more likely to hit those decision makers that you're trying to reach. So basically, that's an example of a story that I've told for years. About how I learned a secret to success in sales. I tell that in my sales classes. I tell it when I have new salespeople that are starting with me at my company. The reason why is because it's a very effective way to get people to kind of change their behavior. Instead of me telling them, "Hey, you have to come in early," I would much rather somebody come in at 7:30, make phone calls until noon, and then take the rest of the day off. They'll typically get a whole lot more done than if they try to make their phone calls between 9:30 and 4, right? So they get a whole lot better results if they make their phone calls early. Again, it's just basically taking a time that I made a mistake or I learned something and using that as a way to teach somebody else. You can use the same thing in your career as well to help change people's behavior without raising resentment.